It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Aggronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belghast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again. Time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 441. Tonight I'm joined by Grace.
Wait, what?
Kodra.
Did you just...
Tam.
What?
Thalen.
Huh?
I assume Grace's mini freak out is because first in line.
I'm not used to that. Hello.
I don't know what Kodra's freak out was about.
I just wanted to be part of something.
I wanted to be part of this.
I'm a follower.
So Tam, I hear you have an expensive yellow box with a crank.
It's not that expensive, or at least it wasn't for me.
I mean, I don't know. Like we'll talk about that. What are your experiences so far?
So I have a PlayDate, which is if you're not familiar, it's the like tiny, Game Boy tech little device with a like little gaming device that's unique thing is it's got a crank on it. And what a weird little thing. It's super interesting. So slight tangent. It's super interesting to see what is going on with like handheld gaming devices generally, but mostly they're getting more elaborate. You go from the DS to the Switch. Now you've got the Steam Deck. You've got a bunch of other big companies making Steam Deck competitors. And the Playdate is like the opposite of this. It's little bite-sized indie games that you can load onto a tiny little box and, play for 5 minutes here and there.
And if you want to relive the magic of the Game Boy, you have to get it in perfect light because it's not backlit.
Yeah, like this is not a high-tech device. It's when I say Game Boy tech, I really do mean it's pretty similar to like the original Game Boy in a lot of ways, except that it's smaller and has its own battery versus some AA's. But it's interesting to me. It's interesting because it's a totally different like little gaming experience than almost anything else. What it reminds me of the most is, do you remember when when the first wave or two of mobile games, before anybody had any idea about monetization?
Yeah, they were playing with gyro sensors for the first time and things like that.
Yeah, it was like Snake and like, little cute puzzle games and just tons and like little bite-size play this in between bus stops kind of games that like eventually just got drowned out by what mobile gaming is now, but like doesn't exist in any other space. And like Playdate is definitely targeting that space. And it's really cute and fun. Like it's just a cute. It like the little boot up is adorable. Like the thing just definitely wants to be your little tiny friend. Keep it with you. If you want to play some, great. You can you can take 5 minutes, play a little bit. You can most everything is a little like, I don't know, 3 to 5 minute. You can play sessions. One of the first games they release for it is it's like a surfing game, and you can be done with a single round of the surfing game in like, a minute and a half, depending on how good you are. For me, it was like 12 seconds until I figured out like basics like the controls. But it's a charming little thing. And it's like, you have to want what it's offering, which are like the kinds of things that you would download on your phone in like 2009.
Mm-hmm.
Or
yeah,
like
the only reason why I throw it any shade is like for $200 I could have given it a backlight.
That's fair. I admit that through a variety of means I did not pay $200 for it. So like, yeah, it's probably priced similarly to the original Game Boy.
Yeah, that's probably, I want to say that the original Game Boy was around like 149-ish or so.
Yeah. It's got an absolutely bonkers battery life, but like that should not come as a surprise in any way at all. And it's got a really interesting, I think that it would be really forgettable if it weren't for the way the experience is crafted, because it's got a bunch of it's got like a store where you can buy games, and they're like, again, 2009 mobile game prices, like $2.99. Really fancy one might be $8. You know, quick little bite, easy bite size. Yeah, I don't mind grabbing this just to give it a shot kind of games. But when you buy it and register it, it starts you on what they call Playdate Season 1, which is a bunch of games. I don't actually know how many, because I haven't looked, because I've just been like leaning into the experience. And it starts you with 2 games for free, and then every week you get 2 more games for, it's like 10 weeks or something. I don't know exactly how long it is. But just like, hey, you've got to try those games for a little bit. Try 2 new games, and it builds you a library of little games just off the bat.
That's pretty cool.
And what they really wanted was to ship everybody their Playdate, and then have Season 1 kick off when everybody had theirs, so that everybody was getting the same games at the same time, so that you'd have a conversation around what games came out. And for supply chain reasons, it didn't really work out, but it's still really interesting. And like, it's perfectly happy to have you sideload games onto it. It's a bunch of interesting, weird little games. I played a surfing game, which uses the crank to adjust your the rotation of the surfboard on the wave you're on. And you want to like jump and do tricks and then land them. So you're like spinning the crank to try to like do 360s. There's one that I haven't played, but my partner did, that's like bird watching, where it's like a bird watching RPG, and you use the crank to focus in and out. There's a heist game that's like clearly inspired by the first Mission Impossible, where you're going down on a wire, except that the crank is like a fishing rod. So you're like fishing rodding your way up and down to avoid security systems and so forth.
I've seen one where it's like like a motion comic book kind of thing, where like the crank is what you use to turn the pages, where it's like a non-interactive thing, but like it's basically just telling a story.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one. I think what I've played the most of is Zipper, which is a Bennett Foddy game. It's really quite good, where it's an isometric game where you play as a samurai, and you're trying to like move such that you cut through a castle full of enemies, and you can use the crank to kind of preview their movements, like winding and rewinding time. But yeah, it's a super cute little thing, and it's the kind of thing that, like, if my kid were a little bit older, I would cheerfully hand her this.
Mm-hmm.
It's
how
it's
durable is it? Is
how
the
what?
question I would have.
How what?
Like, how durable is it? Like, that was one of the things I was worried about, is like how fragile that crank might end up being.
That crank does not feel fragile.
Yeah, like it looks like maybe they repurposed some of the components that you would have for like an SLR camera for like the winding film functionality.
Yes. Like it's such a compact, it feels like a really compact, really well-engineered device. And like the crank is really clever. It's got low profile buttons, so the one that I got came with a cover, which helps. If you just start like smashing it against things, then probably you could break it, most notably like the screen. But like it feels more durable to me than my Switch. Just because unlike the Switch where I feel like if I flexed it too hard, I would just tear the controllers off of the central piece. There's no part of this that I feel like I would be able to like grab and rip off.
Yeah, let's be fair. The Switch feels like it's a cheap Android tablet. I don't know. When I played around with one for a little bit, it felt like the construction was really solid. I'm not sure you could flex it.
Yeah, like it's also just small. Like it's a small device. And honestly, like a lot of it really feels like, at least for the first few games I've played, they handed the developers one of these things, like a physical one, and had them just mess with it before even starting to design a game. Because if I tried to play this for more than, 30 minutes to an hour with my, adult size hands, like it would cramp up. But I don't play any, like there's nothing to play that long. It's all bite-sized stuff. Like honestly, the use case I'm considering is tossing it in my car so that I can do stuff like while I'm waiting in a parking lot or something.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, it's just an interesting, like it's a cute little thing. It really, really, really wants to be your tiny friend that you keep with you all the time. Do I necessarily think that it's like, oh, you absolutely have to go out and purchase this thing for $200? Like, But if it's like, if you have the use case for, I would love a small, low profile gaming device that I can easily take on the go so that I can, fill up a couple of minutes here, a couple of minutes there while I'm waiting for things. It's great. Like, what a cool little thing. Or if you're just like really into indie games, or I think you can get a dev kit for it. And I admit that I'm actually somewhat tempted to try to just make something myself on it, which is the first time I've had that like vague inclination in years. Just because it's such an interesting, it's like, okay, it's got a D-pad and an A-B button, which you know about. They do what you expect, and a crank. And like, you probably want to do something interesting with the crank. You don't have to, but it's there. It's really tactilely satisfying.
Yeah, like you could probably build something for a more interesting platform if you weren't going to use the crank. Like, you might as well use the crank.
Yeah.
So one of the things that happened this week, that I am not directly playing, but I am kind of keeping tabs on, is they announced what the first Diablo 4 season was going to look like. I personally found it kind of underwhelming. Like the challenge with Diablo 4 right now is that there's not a lot to do at the end game.
Right.
Basically, you just need to run nightmare dungeons over and over and over. And they're not particularly fun. So like I was kind of hoping that season 1 would drop some new activities to do, and it's not really. Like, they're kind of implementing something that's a bit like Abyss, but like it's not a game mode. So out in the world, there will be pestilent mobs that you can kill, and they drop a thing that you can then use to summon a harder version of the thing you just killed. And there's a chance that they'll drop these like pestilent heart things that act as gems. And there are, 3 colors of them, along with a universal one that can go in any slot. And it sounds like they're just essentially going to be like extra legendary aspects, so that you'll be able to socket one of these gems instead of like a normal gem, so that you're essentially just going to get extra legendary aspects to build your build, is what it kind of sounds like. Which could be interesting, I guess.
Wasn't one of the problems like builds were kind of awkward unless they got specific things? Does this help with that?
I guess like you can have more of the specific things. I don't know what it's going to shake out to be like. We don't have full information, but they described it as like a legendary aspect. So I don't know how like a legendary aspect it is, or whether or not it's exactly like one. So we'll see. But also, like, it doesn't really solve any of the problems that every single class has 1 to 2 to maybe 3 viable builds. So essentially everyone is playing exactly the same thing. I don't know. Like it's been not well received by a lot of people. I don't know that it would bring me back to play season 1. Especially since it's launching like only a couple weeks ahead of the next Path of Exile League start. I guess they're adding 6 more uniques in total. So like that's the big content drop is 6 more uniques.
I mean, isn't okay? So maybe I'm wrong. Does that help with the problem of you need specific uniques to make builds work? Because are uniques going to be more common to drop? Doesn't this mean that your likelihood of getting the specific unique you need goes down if uniques stay equally likely to get any random unique?
Yeah, and that's the challenge. Like, so they were going. There's a thing in the game called Helltide, which is every 2 hours it's up for an hour. So like it's on an hour, off an hour. And in that mode, there are specific chests that you can farm resources to open. And like it'll reward you a helmet, or it'll reward you a chest piece, or it will reward you a whatever. And they had put in codes so that those could drop uniques. So up to this point, they couldn't drop uniques. And then they released a patch and they made it so you could target farm a unique. And because barbarians and sorcerers have no uniques that drop other than the rarest unique ever, the Shaco, the Harlequin Quest, all of a sudden, like, there went from being like 3 of them that had dropped in the entire world to, I think they said like 150 or so dropped until they caught the patch and fixed it. So they're going to take away the ability to target farm uniques, which again makes it awkward. So yeah, it's going to be rough. And again, I think the challenge is, and I was listening to a Path of Exile streamer say this, is like at level 70, you can get the best gear you will ever get at level 70. And then there's 30 more levels after that. And there's nothing that you're really gearing up to do. Like from level 50 onwards, you're basically doing the same content from that point on. So for the last 50 levels of the game, like there's no aspirational content. Like technically there is a pinnacle boss like Uber Lilith, but like it's just like any of the Uber fights in Path of Exile. The number of people that actually go through the hassle of fighting them is a small portion of the total player base. So like there's just like their answer is you're going to run nightmare dungeons and you're going to just keep running higher and higher keys, but they don't really reward better stuff. They just reward more experience for the glyphs that you have in your Paragon board, which doesn't feel like an interesting reason to keep running them. But like, why do you care about powering up your glyphs in your Paragon board if there's nothing that you're doing trying to get to? And like, there's no new tier of gear that you're trying to hit. Like you got the last of the gear upgrades you would ever get around 70. And like realistically, that's a truthful statement. Like I hit the last world tier at 65. Cause Syl and I ran it. She was 70, I was 65. So from that point on, I was able to get ancestral gear, which is the best gear in the game. And before I hit 70 or 67-ish or so, I had a full set of ancestral gear. Like, it may not be the absolute highest power level I could possibly get, but like, it was in-game gear. Like, it was raid tier gear, to borrow an MMO expression. I had all the gear. And like, now I'm not even 70, and the only real activity is farming a world boss every 6 hours, doing Helltides, every couple hours, and running nightmare dungeons, which are just normal dungeons, but with higher level mobs. And like, there just wasn't any interesting, compelling reason to keep leveling. And like, Syl, being the achievement hunter that she is continuing to level, and she's 91 now. And I assume we'll stop at 100, but I just like, I felt like I ran out of reasons to keep going because there wasn't anything that I was really working towards. And there wasn't enough of a dopamine hit from random rewards to keep me going. Like, because at least in Path of Exile, like, spinning the wheel of fortune that is doing Delve is always interesting. Like, you never know what's going to drop in there. There was the equivalent of that, like, in Diablo 4. And the first season doesn't really add anything. Like, what it reminds me of is kind of the equivalent of that one season when we got an extra pick on Kanai's Cube. Like, yeah, you can do some interesting stuff with it, but like, it wasn't really that game changing.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, most of the D3 seasons were not that game changing for a long time until the like last few. There weren't that many really interesting game changing seasons, so I'm not thoroughly surprised, but I'm just disappointed that there's not some more interesting hook.
Well, and the thing that really pissed the player base off is they spent about half of the seasonal reveal live stream talking about things coming to Diablo Immortal. like they hadn't even announced anything about Diablo 4 Season 1 when they were bringing on Diablo Immortal devs to talk about stuff they were putting in that game first.
They still have not figured out their audience.
No, they don't have a damn clue.
Apparently they don't have phones.
Apparently not. Or internet access to look up the opinions of people. I mean, yeah, so I don't know. It's sad. Like, they had, like, if they were doing research in other games in the genre, like, they would have known kind of what people expect from a season in a modern game. But like, okay, so take Path of Exile, for example. Crucible League, that is just wrapping up, is probably one of the worst leagues for mechanics, but even it had some wild stuff going on and enabled builds that have never existed before and will never exist again. Like, there were chase builds that you could go after that just did crazy stuff, like, you know, the totem explosion build. So it changed the game. Like, for 3 months, it brought new things into the game. And it also had like a really good sandbox state at the same time. And I
do feel like part of the challenge with season, and maybe this is the problem Diablo's running into, because they're talking about putting like new story behind seasonal content.
And that's the other weird thing is, like, they didn't even talk about any of the story content going in. So I don't know. Is there story content, or are they considering these, you know, corrupted mobs as story?
So it feels like Diablo 4 is courting the MMO player in a very big way. And like, a lot of MMO players have really liked Diablo 4. Like, it seems reasonably popular amongst that set.
Well, it was reasonably popular.
Sure.
Like, a lot of the people that were super, you know, bullish on the game have now changed their tune once they've hit the content drought.
The thing is that, like, I think that there's a very reasonable argument that the MMOs have this content problem, right? Like, it is hard for an MMO to keep you interested, but the model of an MMO is vital. Like, it vitally craves keeping you interested. And like, the Diablo style season, like the older Diablo style season, like the Path of Exile style seasons, actually a really interesting way to go about that, where it's like, hey, here's a soft reset button for you to try a bunch of new stuff that maybe you didn't try. last time around, but like it's got to look different in something that's more like an MMO and more tuned for MMO players.
Well, and like I think the problem is an ARPG lives and dies by a fun core mechanical loop. Like it's they involve a lot of repetition, and that loop has to be fun. And I think they thought Nightmare Dungeons were going to be a more compelling proposition than they ended up being. Like they went all in on, like it's the David Pumpkin skit from Saturday Night Live where they're doing the floors, and like 70 of the floors are David S. Pumpkins, and they went all in on David S. Pumpkins, and nobody knows why. Like they went all in on Nightmare Dungeons, and now that Nightmare Dungeons aren't really being received very well, I don't think they have a backup plan.
So again, it sure feels like all of the decisions coming out of Blizzard are a bunch of executives with short-termerism, basically saying, get everything out the door so we can give ourselves as much of a bonus as possible before this thing gets sold off to Microsoft.
Pain.
I mean, I would not be surprised, but
Yep.
Like, Blizzard went from being so careful about making sure the experiences were ones that people cared about and would be like, they would sit until it was done when it was done. And like, when's the last like Blizzard title that came out that we were excited about?
yeah, and I think kind of the sad thing is like the WoW team has tried really hard. From what I understand, Dragonflight is a really good expansion, but like it also has some of the lowest numbers ever because people are just done with it.
I mean, you remember the conversations we had years ago, Bel.
All what would take to kill WoW?
Man,
Two bad expansions.
I remember because it was you and I and a handful of other people, and there were other people that were like, "Tam, you're full of crap. There's absolutely no way." And I was like, "Just 2 bad expansions in a row, and WoW's done."
Yep. And I mean that's basically where we're at. Is like 2 bad expansions killed consumer confidence to the point where they can release what is, from what I understand, a really good expansion. Nobody cares. Like the diehards care, but the people that left, it's not enough to bring them back.
I mean, 2 bad expansions and the company having it come to light how poorly the company was treating its employees.
Yeah.
Did not help.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, I feel like, and inject just a huge amount of personal bias in here, but I feel like those things are related.
Yeah.
Like,
seems possible.
Mm-hmm.
Studios who treat their people really well. There are games where even if the fidelity of the game is not great, I can tell that everybody working on it just loved working on it.
Yeah.
And it shines through in the game.
Well, and you can also tell how bad of an environment is at a studio by the mass exodus. Because, like, there are so many studios that just don't have anybody left that worked on the last couple titles.
Yeah, right. I mean, your churn rate is also a big thing. Like, I mean, I work at a place with people who are going on 20 years. It says a lot about both the overall studio culture and, to some extent, the stability that lets you stay that long also means that your processes are stable. The actual act of building a thing is stable.
Well, in your particular case, like people who left and then came back.
Yeah, I mean, also rare, relatively.
It's just like it sucks. And I don't know if I talked about this on the show, but like there's never been a point in my MMO gaming history where I didn't know at least a couple people that worked at Blizzard. And that's not changed. Like I still know lots of people that work at Blizzard, but it's none of the same people. Not a single person has been there the entire time. And even then, like every time I realize more friends go there, it's a couple years before they're leaving and going somewhere else, and a different friend's coming in, and I'm like, ugh, I don't know if I want to be happy for you. Like, I realize that you thought working at Blizzard was this dream job, but like, I've also seen this mill of people leaving that company. I don't know. I wish you luck.
It is very apparent when people are having fun making the thing that they are making
Yeah.
versus probably operating in pretty miserable work environments and just not enjoying themselves. Like that was, I mean, it was a takeaway I had going through Origins, but like getting to see all of the products that people were working on and were very obviously passionate about and cared about a lot, and like the amount of creativity they were putting into all of this stuff was just breathtaking.
Okay, I'm gonna reorder things a little bit here, but like a prime example is this week. Between Mastodon and Blue Sky, like there's a lot of indie devs, and I am forever coming across interesting looking things. And a game popped up on my radar that looked really cool called Trinity Fusion that just went into early access, and like that game has a lot of love behind it, and there's a lot of really interesting things going on it, and like I'm pretty sure that the devs that are working on it just love it because like it's got a lot of care and attention. And I think that's a prime example of what you're talking about at Origins, is like, pretty creative take on some games.
This looks very Metroidvania.
It is, what if Deadcells and Hades had a kid? And it's like, I don't know, 2D side scroller, but also probably more like Hades than like Deadcells. I mean, you go find weapons in your journey, you find random power-ups, and you'll get like a pick 3 type mechanic whenever you find a power-up, so you can choose which one to... There's a lot of pick 2s as well, where like you'll get 2 things that drop at the same time, but you can only pick one of them up. So you basically have a weapon, a spell ability kind of slot, and then you've got various consumables that you can pick up, various buffs that last the length of the run. Like one of my favorite ones is healing grenades, when like, that way I don't necessarily have to worry too much about getting hit occasionally. Because like every time you kill something, there's a chance of it dropping a healing grenade, which damages bad guys but heals you. So like you can bring back your life, and then there's various things that are like, you deal more damage if you're in full life. You deal more damage like if you're down 30% life. I don't know, it's interesting. It's got air dashes, it's got downward slashes, it's got, it has a lot of movement.
It looks cool. I will have to pick this up. It seems like a lot of people are saying it's very good on deck.
It is very good on deck. It is also just very good with a controller.
Yeah.
Asterisk. I have a weird controller, so I'm not sure it'll be good with my controller.
I don't know, I was playing it with the PS5 controller.
Notably, my controller doesn't have analog joysticks.
That could be interesting. Yeah, because this definitely uses analog joysticks as your movement.
Yeah, as I was saying, it'll probably be good on deck for me.
Yeah. It's also, I would recommend not going into it expecting a Hollow Knight experience.
Right. Like, it's not that polished.
No,
well,
I get
it's not,
that.
It's also not that it's not so much that it's not that polished. It's also not like, it's precise in different ways.
Yeah. It's not pixel perfect jumping kind of game.
Yeah.
But it's got a lot of cool things going on. Like, it feels fun to traverse the world.
Yeah, it's got good movement, and it's got a really, really good sense, especially for something with randomized levels. It's got a really, really good algorithm for spawning teleport pads so that you can just move around a lot, which is real important in something like this.
Yeah, because especially it's a situation where, like, it's also got Castlevania Symphony of the Night style mini maps that, fill out as you go through the level. which is nice because sometimes you'll realize, oh, I missed a spot way back at the beginning of the level, but there's a teleport that'll take me near there.
Yeah, I have a few quibbles with it. Like, it's a lot of fun. I think that first off, it's too hard even on easy.
Right.
Like,
That's kind of my complaint, is like easy mode still is a significant challenge.
I mean, it's actually, I've played it on a variety of difficulty settings, and honestly, the problem is not like the game is so hard it's brutal on easy. It's that the delta between normal mode and easy mode is unnoticeable.
Right. Like, so the easy mode is you get to choose a perk, and I think some of the perks are more important than others, but like the default one is monsters are less aggressive, which just means that their attack speed is slower, but they don't do any less damage. They don't you know they don't have any less health or anything like that. They just attack slightly less often. So yeah, I don't know that, like, somebody that's going to choose the easy mode is not really going to notice a difference.
Yeah. And like the I don't know, so it's definitely taking notes from games like Dead Cells, but it is not taking all of the right notes. So I randomed into a build because it's got this sort of like Hades style random build where you get a bunch of passives that like do all kinds of weird things. And I got one that was enemies have a 20% chance of dropping a thing that heals you.
Right, healing grenades. Yeah.
The difference between I have that and I don't have that is unbelievably stark.
Yep.
And the problem is not that ability is overpowered or all of the other abilities are underpowered. It's that unlike Dead Cells, it doesn't heal you between every level. So, and like that's such an important part of Dead Cells is, when you get to the end of that level, you're going to have a time bonus and you're going to have a health restore going into the next level.
And also, like, if there's a heal in the map somewhere, it is a consumable drop, and you're having to choose the health over something that's probably way more useful. So, like, it kind of feels bad that there's no way to recover from any hits, because, like, you're going to take hits. It doesn't matter. Like, even if you've played through a map a bunch of times, like, there's just enough randomness in the encounters that, like, yeah, no, you're going to take some hits, because some of the things just happen to appear in exactly the wrong combination, like the stupid drill shell things from above and the flying squids that seem way harder than anything else. But if you want to heal, you end up, I don't know, you end up having to lose power to heal. But you're right. Success went up massively with healing grenades because it gave you a predictable way of regening when you did take a hit. I also would say that not all the weapons are balanced, because like there are some weapons that just felt universally better than others. Like there's a twin daggers that just felt not useful at all. Like it would have been better to have any ability just because you didn't have much reach.
Yeah. And I mean, the weapon balance is something that I feel like it's clearly in early access, and they're clearly working through it. And like the weapon balance, that's going to get tweaked.
Right.
I worry more about the core loop where it's like health is such a precious resource, but you don't want to create a game where you don't actually want to engage in the interesting combat because you might get hurt.
Well, and I think the answer is the intended loop is to just grind against it until you get to choose some of the power-ups in the in-betweens after you've died a few times. When you're in the, I don't know, space station-y looking area, that's actually kind of a cool effect. Is there's this zone that you go to after you've died, and you can do kind of the Rogue Legacy thing where you're buying power-ups. But like it's essentially a round platform, and as you run around it, you eventually like circuit the entire area. So it's kind of cool for a 2D game to have something like that in it. But I did notice, like, after I had bought some upgrades, that at least the first map got way faster with some upgrades. I don't know. I think it's an interesting game, and I think it will be interesting to watch as it gets tweaked. Okay, Tam, what is the Shackled by Tradition topic?
Oh man. So okay. So this started like when I wrote it, I was thinking about a little bit about Warhammer 40K and how so much of its game balance issues are game balance issues it had in the 80s and feel like just a core structural part of the entire thing that if they changed them now, it would be a disaster. But also like my unbelievably cursed current RPG character, where I was checking and my math may not be perfect here, but I've made like 47 rolls over the course of the campaign, and less than 10 have succeeded. And like and had some conversations with online with some other game devs about it, and one of them was like, yeah, it's because D20 sucks. Like D20 is a terrible resolution mechanic.
Not wrong.
Because there's no, it's just tradition. It's not actually good. It's better than D6, which is what preceded it, because there's more variance. But more variance doesn't help the expected value.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and it's like, it got me thinking about things like Powered by the Apocalypse, which, boy, am I going to make some people who listen to our show and like that mad. But I mostly don't think terribly highly of Powered by the Apocalypse. I think that it is an RPG system that has copped one excellent idea and has mostly just ridden on that being great, which is the fact that it uses 2d6 resolution. And 2d6 has a nice bell curve to it. But it got me thinking about all of these kinds of games, MMOs with hotbars, which evolved from JRPGs with multiply nested menus of abilities to select from, that are all like both these sort of elemental core things that everybody thinks of, like that's what that kind of game is, but also is just like a shackle that keeps them from, it's a tradition that they keep up because that's the genre or that's the type of thing, but isn't actually necessarily serving them.
Yeah, 2d6 resolution is really interesting if you can figure out how to do it right, because like if you manage to have something that's easy, like every point further on that easy curve, like a 3-up is very, very likely, just because there's not a lot that's lower than that. Like you have a 1 in 36 chance of failure.
Yeah.
But like it does mean that you have a relatively low window for assigning those values.
Yeah. Whereas D&D or Pathfinder 2, your die roll is basically a coin flip. Your actual stats and skills are just the gate to see if you can make the check at all. Is it even worth you making the check?
Or how much is this coin weighted?
Well, the coin's not even weighted. That's the thing, is that if you're assuming that you are doing things appropriate for your level, which you should be, then the coin is always weighted to about a 40% chance, 40 to 50% chance to succeed. Always. Because the target numbers go up commensurate with your skills. In fact, the only way to ensure that you stay in that 40 to 50% success rate range is to continually invest in those skills. So you have to put all of your points, however those points take form, into those things that you want to be able to attempt, versus these are the things you're good at. Like these are the things that it's worth even rolling a die about. Because like if you're level 5 and an expert lockpicker and you're going up against a level 5 lock, first of all, if you're not an expert, you can't even try it. And second of all, even if you could, your odds of success are so low that it's not worth it. Like you're looking at like a 15 to 20% chance to actually do it. You still need to roll like a 13 or 14 or better most of the time. But I also see how you get there, because you can easily have that little +1 every level over a 20 level span. You know, just like in an MMO, you can keep on having new ranks of an ability. You can keep on unlocking new abilities to put on your hotbar to make up the 60, 80, 100 levels that you need to fill to make feel meaningful, because MMOs have somewhere between 50 and 100 levels. That's just what they have. Whether or not that's a number that makes sense, that's what you have to fill. And if you level up too many times without getting anything new, you're like, well, what was the point? Like, this feels like I'm not doing anything. So where's the cool part?
Yeah.
But if I said make an MMO with only 10 levels, or, you know, burn me at the stake, what if we didn't have levels and did progression a different way? Like, it would be like, oh no, that wouldn't feel right. Because you've got this sort of built-in tradition around this is what progression feels like. And it's just an interesting thing to think about. Like, if I'm looking at a new game, I mean, especially, you know, now I'm almost 40, how often am I going to see something that actually feels new and interesting, or am I going to be like, yeah, I've seen this again, I've seen this already?
I mean, most of what we've seen feels very much like a remix, and as is evidenced by the fact that we oftentimes describe it in terms of things we've seen before. You know, like the game we were just talking about, I said was Deadcells meets Hades.
Yeah, and like,
yeah, but I think there's the ability to look at those games and say, okay, what worked and what didn't work, and that's important.
Yeah, it's like the more recent Final Fantasies. Like, are they perfect? No, but they have found their footing in a thing that is completely unlike the previous Final Fantasy games in any way at all. But like, still captures the feel, like the vibe of Final Fantasy without being recognizable as such. If you're looking at like FF4 as a comparison point,
Yeah,
it's really hard to do. I mean, it took them what, a decade of not really releasing much of anything, or at least not having like the big smash hits for a while.
I do think it's worthwhile to, like, when you're going to try and emulate something, make sure you go out and see what the critics said about it, the people who weren't as enamored, like where they saw the holes, because that might be useful in trying to put yourself in a different headspace.
Well, I mean, we were talking about Diablo 4 earlier and how they were definitely going for more of an MMO vibe. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. I think there's place for an MMO that only has 5-6 abilities.
Yeah, so
and feels more ARPG.
So stepping back though, I think all of that sounds really good. And then they didn't think, they were shackled by tradition. They implemented seasons like they would an ARPG
Exactly.
season. And like, that's exactly the problem. Like, for everything I'm hearing is this season doesn't make sense for Diablo. Like, it doesn't make sense for this game. Maybe this structure should have been different. Maybe it should have, the post game should have looked more MMO like, or something new.
Right. Like, I think it would have been a better game had they just embraced that this was the Diablo MMO. Like, it would have still tweaked the ARPG folks looking for a traditional Diablo experience, but I don't think we would have had as much to complain about, because it would have been very clear, oh, they're going in a totally different direction. Okay, cool. Let's see what they're doing. Because, like, I think someone is going to make a really fun, compelling MMO that uses a limited skill palette like an ARPG. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun when somebody really nails it. Because, like, the older I have gotten, I never want more than 10 abilities on my character.
I agree. the Secret World was a really fun game up
Yeah.
until a point.
Yeah, like they did a lot of stuff right, and
then they were shackled by tradition, and they implemented the end game. Like, going back and looking at it, boy, the Secret World was such a cool game. And then they're like, well, what do we do with the end game? Well, what do other MMOs do? Just do that.
Yeah, let's just put the boilerplate end game in.
And boy, did it feel like it didn't work for that game, especially.
And it really makes me think about games that are like because like even endgame as a concept.
Mm-hmm.
Like endgame as a concept says, what do you do after you've beaten the game? It's okay to just roll credits.
Mm-hmm.
You can just do that.
They did roll credits.
Like, and endgame suggests that this should be a forever game.
And maybe an MMO shouldn't be a forever game?
I mean,
if you want forever money, it needs to be.
But
see,
it doesn't.
Does it?
That's
okay,
the
but wait
thing.
a second.
Like, I don't think you have to.
And like part of me is like, hey, maybe you have more story content, but like you don't have to gate the like super serious, ultra hardcore stuff behind the end game. And maybe you should make sure that your super serious, ultra hardcore stuff is still fun for everyone who's going to play it. And maybe like it should be something that you're like bringing people up to speed with. Like, but that game, I think if they rolled credits and like I had done all the content and I had like, I don't know, some mini games that I could do to like I loved my character so much by the end of that game because they had told such an interesting story with it. And I would have happily just continued to inhabit the world if I could have like done, I don't know, some small side quests or something periodically.
I logged back in and played when they released new content. I logged back in and played it because that was what I was there. That was the thing that got me into the game, and it was good. It was good stuff. It was what they were good at, and I got more of it. But I didn't need to be. I didn't need to be playing it.
You didn't need to be like pushing yourself or challenging.
Well, I didn't need to be doing that, and I also didn't need to be playing it every single day from the end of the point where I hit the credits to the next time content came out.
I think it all depends on how you're monetizing.
Yeah, I mean, it's
if you're monetizing based on a subscription, which is what a lot of games were doing at that time, even that game was subscription based, then you're trying to keep people from unsubbing until the next content drops.
Yep. I mean, it's another shackle. You'd be shackled by the business model too. Because I bet if Secret World had released with ESO's content model, like current content model, where it's got a cosmetic store and you pay for new content when it comes out instead of a sub, I would have stuck with that for a while.
Yeah, I mean, they would have had to have solved some of the problems that existed. Like, the biggest problem with Secret World was it was hard to figure out what was newly added to the game, since all content could be completed over and over and over forever. And I do wonder how much of that you can request everything was just trying to put additional grind in to keep people in the game longer.
Yeah, I don't know. Secret World is one of the games I had the most fun role-playing in. I mean, partially because every like role-playing scene felt like an absolute bonkers vampire LARP for the most part. All of your characters were ridiculous. It was great.
Oh, it was fantastic. Like, I don't know that there's any MMO I've been so excited to go through the leveling process in than Secret World.
Well, it's simultaneously one of the best experiences and also one of the most disappointing experiences when we reach the point where, oh, okay, these things that we liked playing that were fun to play are no longer viable all of a sudden once we hit this point.
Yeah, I mean, we hit the point where the game was like, okay, it's time for you to stop playing, and so we did.
Yep. But like, you're right, I did come back several times. Like, I played the Cairo thing. I played the university content that was the first drop. That was awesome.
Yeah, it was great. But like,
I should have come back. I loved that game.
They added a bunch of content, and it was really good. I mean, Disco Elysium is a game where it says you reach a point. I love Disco Elysium. It's incredible. And if you reach a point where it's like, okay, you're done with this game. And I say, okay, that was great. I enjoyed myself. And like, you could do that with other types of games. Like it doesn't have to be an exclusively single player game for you to be able to say, okay, I'm done with this for now.
Well, and I think that people would have probably continued to play Secret World in that fashion. But the challenge that they ran into was, one, they were trying to monetize around subscription and then rapidly shift away from a subscription model, which ultimately caused them to relaunch the game. But the other problem is they never could quite nail a reliable content release cadence.
Yeah.
And like, it doesn't matter what the cadence is, there needs to be a predictable one. Like, you need to tell your players, okay, come back in 3 months, come back in 6 months, come back in a number of months or weeks or whatever your cadence is, so that they can plan around it. Like, oh, hey, I know 3 times a year, 4 times a year, 5 times a year, whatever, I'm going to have new things to play. So I can go away and be ready to re-experience the content and be happy to come back. Because like, that was one of the things that I kind of loved about Diablo 3 Seasons was like, at reality, like, it took us a weekend to beat everything. And then we had 3 months or the remainder of 3 months to chill, so that when the next one came out, we were ready to do it again. Like, awesome. I'm ready to come back to this. And I know at such and such date, I'm going to come back to this. Like, had it been that way with Secret World, like, we could have even planned around it. Like, oh, we know in 2 months there's going to be another content patch. Sweet. See you then.
Yes, we will. And a lot of games are doing this. Like, I mean, I think of Warframe. Warframe does this very well. But I think that's possibly the model MMOs should go. It's free-to-play EverQuest.
And I honestly want more games to adopt the, okay, I leveled once, I'm done leveling. Now it's all going to be horizontal progression. Because like, that's one of the things that I have come to really like about Guild Wars 2 is the fact that every time new content goes into that game, it's just adding additional toys to play with. You know, like I did Terrir the other night, and it's probably been the first time in over 6 months that I had done a Terrir. That's still a really fun event. I can go back and revisit it. Like, I've been questing through Living World Season 3 stuff. Those zones are really fun. I don't spend much time in them, but they're really fun zones. You know, so I would happily, you know, pay for content drops if they happened at a reliable, you know, pace, and then also, you know, had a fairly reliable content bar, quality bar. I don't know. Like, I think it will be interesting to see who can adopt the MMO model to something new. And I think whoever does it first is going to have a hit on their hands.
I think that it's going to take redefining what an MMO is.
Well,
yes.
So the problem that I have is like, there's a lot of games that seem to be trying to adapt the MMO model to something of what, I don't know, like almost the Overwatch style of content releases. And I don't know that there's enough investment in that. And I don't mean investment like money. I mean like player investment in your character if you're, you know, releasing temporary content.
Temporary content is not a good idea.
Well, you're going through all of the trouble, but leaving none of it in for your players to soak up over time.
Yeah, like spending all that effort for content that's going to go away. Like, yeah, that it seems like a terrible idea.
Like, you can take content out of your game, but you should have a very good, very understandable reason, and should probably be replacing that content with something. And like, it's possible to just have too much content to ever catch up on, but that's a when do you make new on-ramps problem, not a how much content is in your game problem. It's just a harder problem to solve, though.
I mean, Final Fantasy 14 kind of has that problem. It takes a really long time to catch up in that game. Other games like ESO have solved it by just essentially making everything an on-ramp.
Yeah.
You can choose wherever you want to start, and everything else will still be there waiting on you. You're like, I am strictly following chronological content release order for my replay of Guild Wars 2, but like, that's a me problem. That's not that game's problem.
I'm also doing.
I am in Living World Season 3, about halfway through, so...
Well, you're into the good stuff then.
I know, I'm in the
not
good
yet
stuff
into
now.
The good stuff.
It is my goal to have the Ranger caught up by the time that the expansion drops.
Yeah.
I'm I just started Living World Season 1.
Living World Season 1 feels very front-loaded. Living World Season 2 was a bit of a slog. It was a couple days ago I hit the point where I remembered, I hated Bram at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, at which point?
3? Yeah, when he's... Yeah.
Living World Season 3, when he's the moody teenager. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
he has reasons, but like...
Yeah, I mean, it's...
He's still awful.
Yeah, I mean, there is that element of like, you know, you're kind of choosing a dragon over him, and he's mad about it.
I
But
mean,
also,
Living
you know,
World
maybe we shouldn't end the world.
Living World Season 1 was definitely... Bram was the most improved thanks to that, because I actually got to understand why he was the way he was.
Yeah. Rox is always great. Like,
Yes.
Rox is never not amazing. Like, I don't know. Like, it's probably a toss-up for me whether I like Timey or Rox the most. Rox is probably consistently the best.
Yes. Yeah, Rox is never not just a great person to have on your team. She is a team player.
Probably getting to the end of a show, I think. Any other short topics we want to talk about?
Oh my god, Strange New Worlds is so good. It's so good. Like,
It's nice to have legitimately good Star Trek again.
boy.
I need to get caught up.
On the other hand, I'm not real sure if Secret Invasion is any good.
Oof.
I'm three episodes in, and I'm just not sure.
I need to sit down and watch it.
More importantly, you need to sit down and watch Across the Spider-Verse.
If I could.
It
I
is
would.
amazing.
It's not even streaming yet.
Yeah.
It was super good.
Yeah, I would like to watch it, but, you know, it'll happen at some point, eventually. Also, this is your weekly reminder, watch Nimona. Nimona's great.
Nimona is
Just
amazing.
watch it.
Good.
Watch it
I have
and
now
watch it
watched
again.
it. It is great.
Yes.
But we're going to put aside talking about that
Yes.
for another show.
We'll tell you more about how great it is another time.
Also, I guess this is my time to plug something. If you are uncertain by the frustrating landscape that is Twitter and or Meta and or Blue Sky and or whatever, Gamepad.Club is a lovely place.
It is. Also of note, if you're not already on Mastodon and you do decide to like get on Mastodon, don't use the Mastodon app.
Yeah, don't use
Just-
the Mastodon app.
Like that's a thing that I feel like I occasionally see people mention it, but I don't feel like it's said enough. The official Mastodon app is the barest of bare bones.
Yeah, like that was
There is
the
better.
The reason why I said, Game Club or Gamepad.Club is a lovely place is this week on the first flash or checkpoint from the new moon base, Graham basically was like, if you want to be on Mastodon, just join kind.social. Don't go through any of the join options. Just sign up there. It's far too confusing if you use any of the sign up processes.
It really
just
is.
go there. So I'm saying, just go to Gamepad.Club. It's lovely.
Yeah.
A lot of us are there, and I help run it, so it's a lovely place.
Yeah, it's a friendly place. And it is small enough that like the local feed is useful and interesting.
Yep. But also, if you're going to use mobile, I would suggest Megalodon or Tusky for Android.
I use
and
Tusky.
Ivory or Metatext for iOS.
I use Toot.
Toot is also, I've heard, really good.
It's
Toot.
I mean, it's fine. It's
Ivory
a distinctive
is-
icon, which makes it easy.
I mean, like, I love Megalodon because it's a giant pink blowhigh shark, or as everyone else calls it, blahaj. The IKEA shark.
Did not know that name.
But yeah, I think Ivory is from the folks that did Tweetbots, and it is a
believe
paid software. But I've heard on iOS it's the most complete experience. About the only thing that it doesn't have is instant specific emoji. I don't know that any of them have good instant specific emoji support. I spent 15 minutes today uploading really adorable bee emoji. But anyway, yeah, like, so if your social media experience is miserable, just chill out and join Gamepad.Club or any of the other wonderful places. Like, I think it's tech.lgbt is a great community. Like, there's a bunch of bright spots, but like, don't go through the sign up process if you're at all interested in Mastodon. It is just too frustrating. Any final thoughts?
You should play I Was a Teenage Exocolonist. Like, I know I've talked about it already. I have completed my 7th playthrough. I think I have completed the game. What a ride. Next up, Dave the Diver.
I have been seeing so much about Dave the Diver in my feed.
I have also been seeing lots about Dave the Diver, so I'm curious what this is.
I have not played enough of it to have an opinion worth talking about, but I have played enough of it to know I want to play more of it.
That's a good sign.
I will have to play these things. I'm really trying to get my way through this my 4-job Fiesta this time.
I had a great mix-up this week where there were simultaneously a bunch of people talking about Baldur's Gate 3, and it made me think it had actually released.
No, it was just amazing. It was just unbelievably amazing.
Yeah, August is when it comes out. But like, everybody was talking about it, and I assume it was the trailer.
No.
It's a few things, but mostly it's bears.
Yeah. Okay, we are talking about the same thing.
It's bears.
It's bears.
But like, it made me think, oh, sweet, I'll install it and play it. And then I'm like, wait, it still says it's in early access.
Yeah,
what the hell?
No, it's bears. You gotta love them.
I just love that 2 days prior, the Midnight Society had a thread about the most Canadian book, a book titled Bear, about that very thing. And yeah, just like pure coincidence, apparently. Bears.
Anyway, on that note, hopefully you enjoyed the show. And we will do this again next week, and we'll see you then. Night.
Good night.
Good night.
See ya.